everyone. Welcome back to the Corporate Talk. Today I have a special guest, Jochen Moninger, who is a co-founder of Impacta, a venture capital that dedicates for startups and small business in Africa and has dedicated many years in projects and business in the bottom of the pyramid. And thank you, Jochen, for accepting the invitation, for being part of the Corporate Talk today.
Hello, Carolina.
Jochen, you have a very interesting career in the African entrepreneurship, and that's the first question I have, and would like to learn more about how is the African entrepreneurship environment, and what are the highlights that always motivates you in making business with African entrepreneurs.
So that is not so easy to answer because Africa is very big and there's many different livelihoods and economies. So I think to generalize is not reasonable. Of course, you don't have, what you have in Europe or probably also in America is very big companies that employ hundreds, thousands of people. And in many African countries, you don't have these huge corporates. I mean, you have big companies, whether it's banks or also mining firms, there's all type of companies, but you don't have these large multi-global companies. So we say also that actually in Africa, there is a highest ratio of entrepreneurs in different population groups. Yeah, of course, that has also something to do with opportunities and chances. So because you don't have all the big companies, you have to check your own options, maybe more. So I don't have the statistics. Some time back, I was working on the topic, but on a percentage of population, you find the most people or more people here in Africa who go for entrepreneurship than compared to Europe. So now, of course, you have a lot of different enterprises. Yeah, it starts with micro enterprises, or let's say the chewing gum sellers on the side of the street who buy inventory in the morning for maybe $10 and then trying to have in the evening 20 or 30% more. So you have a lot of small boutiques and kiosks. So what we know from Germany, even before the time I grew up, we called it Tante Emma Laden. So there's basically a small kiosk on each corner of the street where you can buy everything. So traders that it's difficult to say how much revenue they make, but probably at the end of the month they would have 200, 300, 500 euros, which is good to sustain a family. Yeah. And then, of course, you have all sort of companies with 5 people, yeah, like small bakeries, micro bakeries. And you have bigger companies, 20 people, manufacturing, textile, for example. And of course, you have also the very big companies where you have then maybe 500, 600 people. For example, in IT outsourcing, yeah, or in the textile industry, yeah, when people sit head and head. So a lot of entrepreneurship.
That's nice. That's good to hear. And what are the key learnings that you think the corporates around the globe should learn from the mindset and the behavior of the African startups and entrepreneurs?
Again, to generalize is not easy, but I think what we observe here is a lot of innovation, yeah, because you have maybe some restrictions on what you can access in terms of material or also resources. So people become very innovative, trying to find solutions for their issue where they can and what they can. And that's quite amazing, actually, how resilient yeah, many of African business and startups are. So here specifically in Ethiopia, where I live and work, there is no venture capital firms, for example. I think there's two VCs registered in the country, versus in Kenya, where you have more than 180 registered. Yeah? So in such an ecosystem, it's not easy to take on money as a young entrepreneur, or also older entrepreneur, but someone who wants to scale the business. So what many enterprises are forced to is to become break even very, very early on their entrepreneurial journey. And I find that interesting because it gives a certain resilience, yeah, to companies. They are forced to hit the market very, very quick. Yeah? There is not much play money in the market. And I think that's good. Of course, we have also an issue with politics, civil unrest, sometimes smaller conflicts and others, market closures. So again, we see really a high level of resilience and adaptation to circumstances by local entrepreneurs, and that's definitely amazing. It's also the issue about risk. Yeah, so corporates in Europe look maybe less here on East Africa. When the others say it will be the booming region in the world in the next 2 decades. So, yeah, maybe taking the risk here in new markets is also something big corporates can consider.
That's nice. Nice. Thank you for that. And you mentioned about the resilience that is necessary, especially due to challenges like infrastructure, resources, funding, and other even local challenges, right, by the politics and local conflicts. So, do you have an example or a story that you cross in your career that you highlight this resilience being very strong in an entrepreneur who goes there and make it happen?
I can give you an example, but I mean, it's only one example. There's many different circumstances. And now the example I have is it's basically in a conflict or post-conflict situation. So there was a war in the last years between one of the regions and the federal government, and about 1 million people died, or 700,000 to 1 million. It's just 2 or 3 years ago. So it was very, very cruel. So in today, actually, I happened to come from that region. So I was sleeping there last night. And so I had been working with enterprises before the conflict started. And then for 2 years, basically, there was no contact with my company network because there was no telephone, no internet. It was everything shut down, the roads. I mean, there was war, people dying. And then, of course, 2 years later, the war stopped. I was one of the first travelers to that region then, and then I met these young entrepreneurs I knew from before the conflict. And I mean, I had one. He have a marvelous product, extension cable, locally made by local resources, better than the imported equivalents. I had about 15 workers at that time. And I mean, 8 of them just died during the war, yeah, because they were forced to go to the front line and they never came back. And of course, for 2 years also, there was no operation in the business because there was a curfew. Banks were closed. I mean, everything was closed. So the money that the entrepreneur had, basically, he had to spend during the war, yeah, whether it was on food or sustaining the people around him, maybe also bribing the armies that he doesn't have to go to the front and so on. After 2 years, you're blank, yeah. And of course, also the foreign armies came and they also destroyed the production line Yeah, for example, from the father of that entrepreneur, he had a bigger crashing line for marmor stones that was just destroyed or taken away. And from the younger entrepreneur, today he's about 30 years old, also they stole the dynamos and the computers from the workshop. So it was a big catastrophe. So when I met him, it was just after opening again the borders. It was about 1 year ago. But what he did is he sold his car. He said, let me get back on feet. Yeah, let me sell my car. Then I have money for raw materials. Then my product was good before the war. Yeah, so now I will do it again. And he restarted the operation. Yeah, and he is back on the same output that he had before the war, can invest now the profits into buying land and building houses. So it's amazing how people really go down and then by the right passion go also up. I mean, he was not the only one there. There's others. The workshops were burned. Yeah, again, of course, the capital destroyed. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 months, there was a delegation from the German ministry coming to do the bilateral negotiations. So I was asked to organize a dinner in that northern region. So we organized a dinner in one of the workshops of the local entrepreneurs. And we brought these German politicians, you know, the flying business class, sleeping in the big hotels, to the local workshop to take dinner. And that was actually amazing for 2 sides. So everyone was impressed about the resilience and also the belief, yeah, that you can rebuild what was destroyed through external shock. And I can say now, 1 year later, yes, they are rebuilding. But also for the entrepreneurs, it was really important to get such kind of visitors, because now they felt some hope, yeah, and some channel to come back. So that is one example. That's after a conflict, so it's a little bit extreme, but I think it shows how.
Wow, it really shows. And you mentioned the right word. I think it's also related to the passion, right? He had a passion. He wanted to make it happen, even in the middle of such a terrible situation. He went back and started from zero all over again. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think this is a type of challenge that many entrepreneurs in Europe, Africa, or Asia will never see, will never feel. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And I always heard about the African local communities that support each other. Do you think the local communities play a role also in the success of the startups in the region?
That's a difficult question. So, I mean, with increased urbanization and modern lifestyle, and in the cities now also they build everywhere these 13, 15 floor big houses. I think that the sense of community is maybe not there anymore, yeah, or not in that kind of setting at least. Of course, you have the churches and so on who still gather people also in urban setting. But I mean, if you go to the villages, yes, I mean you have still a lot of people living in villages actually, and the people in the villages, the small cities, they're actually extremely well organized, because everywhere you have women committees, youth committee, a sport club. I don't know, you have a lot of structures. And that is also important because it contributes to social protection of a group. So you don't have, not like in Europe where you have a state can cater for everything what you need. So you're more relying on your surroundings. That's important, especially also in farming. Yeah, for example, coffee farming. And then one small farmer, I mean, it's not much coffee he make on a small piece of land. But if it's then aggregated with all the neighbors, yeah, then certainly you get a sort of negotiation power, yeah, towards your buyers. there is also traditional forms of governance, that villages have, so rotating system of kingdomship and others. And I think that is still there. So in how far that now concerns startups, I mean, first of all, who wants to make business in the rural areas? I think that business model needs to build on such existing structures. So, for example, distribution of fertilizer, you have to go through those structures. Or, for example, I mentioned already coffee aggregation, washing of coffee, of sesame, or any other crop that can be sourced from multiple farms. Then you need to build on such communities. But now let's look at the modern startup, or at least I think what people then link a little bit with it. It's often very urban, modern services. So I think there's also already a great issue about individualization of society, actually. If you not go out of town.
Yeah, okay. Interesting to see this modernization also affecting the communities. And I have a last question here, because you mentioned some interesting stories, and I would like to know which kind of advice would you give based on your years of experience with African entrepreneurs to other entrepreneurs around the world. Which kind of advice would you give to them? Very broad question.
I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, I met a lot of people like me who migrated to Africa and then trying to start business, and I saw many people failing. Because I mean, it takes just time that you understand your locality and how you can behave in terms of offering your product and service, your supply chain, your sales market, your brand. And I think also it takes 3, 4, 5 years, until really you have adapted your great business idea to the local challenge or base situation. And many give up earlier. Many give up earlier. So now African entrepreneurs, I mean, I once listened to a conference. There was also an African leader saying when in Africa the telecommunication network started, and suddenly SMS technology was available. In Africa, they invented mobile money payment, and it was basically the first in the world. Wow. So now when you give to the African the blockchain technology, they will again overcome what has been there in more settled economies. So, and why that? Because people are just very young. So in Ethiopia we have 17.5 years of average of age in the population. So people are very open for innovation. They're very open to test out borders. And so you make sure your system basically boils all the time. And what I also observe is a lot of young people in influential positions, whether it's in banks or in companies. People get into responsibility very early. And I think that contributes actually to good entrepreneurship. And I would assume that in a couple of decades, we will have also many African companies that will open branches, somewhere in Brussels or Berlin or New York.
That's true. I agree with that. And also there are many reports talking about future trends, how Africa will explode in 10 years from now. So I also believe in that. Great potential there.
It's already exploding.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, thank you so much, Jochen. It was really nice talk. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's late for you, so I really appreciate it. Also exchanging a little bit of your experience, and I will post about Impact here in the link as well,
Okay, thank you.
so people can know more about this business model that you work on.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.